Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard. Welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Pyramid Show that happens here every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. at Fairway Hotel. And the recorded version of the same runs on Amidst television, our partner sponsor, every Saturday from 4 to 5 p.m. And these shows also are carried on our various platforms, the Spy Uganda, Detective UG, and of course the Pan-African Pyramid website, and the Pan-African Pyramid the YouTube channel, and also the Pan-African Pyramid, the Spy Uganda television. All these are our partner sponsors. We also thank Fairway Hotel, where we sit every Friday from 5 to 8 p.m. Fairway Hotel is also our partner sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, challenges of African parenting cultures amid this 21st century Western world lifestyle. To put it simply, there are challenges that Africans are facing today in as far as raising their children in the African context are concerned. Those days before we had these lifestyles. Today, when you're talking about a child of 3 years, you say, your child, please don't access phone. Somebody is going to read for me a right that I am violating against the child. When you tell your child, I don't want you to access internet today, 4, 3, 5 years old, somebody is reading for you the article in the Constitution that you are violating against your child. So there is that kind of environment, the ecosystem that has been brought by, of course, the current 21st century lifestyle, mainly influenced by the Western world. And we realize that somehow, somewhere, it is eating within our traditions and norms and cultures of Africa. How the African child used to be brought up from a home. A homestead was actually a community. A child in a home was in a community. It didn't matter whether that child was from Mr. Kashaya, whether that child was from Professor Lenyo, whether that child was for Irumba. For as long as that child lived in that community, that child was for that particular community. By the way, when I was growing up, sometimes, whenever these cars would stop, if I was a child who was tired, I would jump in a taxi. They would bring me free of charge from school to home. Right now, it doesn't happen. No, it doesn't. So, we realize that there is something that Africa is losing. If we don't talk about it, finally, everything they will say, no, please, we are living in a global village. So, a global village where my culture, my norms, my traditions are being eroded because it's a global village. A global village where you say a lion should live with a goat. It's a global village. A goat should not complain. We know that we live in one world, but there are things that communities believe in. The norms, the cultures, the traditions of a certain society, those must be upheld amidst other challenges of society. So I believe that as an African child, as an African parent, there is a challenge that they are facing in raising their children in the African context. So that's what we would like to right now focus on. What are those challenges? Today there is this technology. There is IA coming. You find a 5-year-old is accessing a phone, and that phone that baby is accessing, he's seated in her bedroom. The parent is not even taking care of what that child is watching. By the time you get to know it, the child could be watching things that are not of his or her age. And so these are things that we must discuss as Africans. Because everything is good, Professor Lenyo. But there is nothing that I'm going to accept good to me if that thing is actually destroying my humanity, my being, me, Irumba. If anything is adding value to me, then that is something good that I will adopt. If anything is taking away even 1 inch of who I am, I will fight that thing. So, for me, that's the context.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Yes, Right Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank you for bringing up this topic at a very momentous moment.
Yes.
Right Honorable Speaker, we are in the month of June.
Yes.
Right Honorable Speaker, according to the United Nations Resolution 42 and 47, 1989, the 1st of June was designated Global Parenting Day. How is the world to parent? As for us on the African continent, our resolve is clear that we want to parent our children the African cultural way. That's the only way we can survive the onslaught. Right Honorable Speaker had made a statement thanking you for bringing this topic in the month of June.
It concerns
On the 1st June every year, according to the United Nations General Assembly resolution, the world celebrates the World International Parenting Day.
Oh.
So the whole month is a month
it is
of
timely.
Right Honorable Speaker, also this month, June, we have the African Child Month observation on the 16th June. This is the day the international community and the African Union, the United Nations and the African Union, observe the Day of the African Child. The challenges the African child is facing, still in this same month. So, Right Honorable Speaker, it is very cardinal that we discuss this topic this month. I want, since we have a representative of the President among us, Mr. Kashaya, I would like through you to appreciate the work the government has done to produce a parenting guideline. In 2017, the government of Uganda designated that year as the family year. After that, they produced the parenting guidelines. And I want to urge you, if you're parents or fathers, to access the parenting guidelines. Even if you're not a father, access the parenting guidelines so that you know what your father is supposed to do or what your grandfather is supposed to do. Finally, so I want through you to thank the President for having personally ensured that we have parenting guidelines. I think we are the only nation in Africa that has it. And I've checked that guideline, it goes to the roots of African parenting. Unfortunately, many parents don't even know that they are parenting guidelines. And that's why, Right Honorable Speaker, it is rightly said that when you want to hide something from an African, put it in writing.
Put it in writing.
So many parents are letting their children adopt rotten Western lifestyle, and they don't know that there are parental guidelines that could help. Finally, this month also, Right Honorable Speaker, is the International Father's Day. It is marked again by resolution on the 21st of every month, and then liturgically, it is marked on the 22nd in every church in the world. They observe World Father's Day. And that's now how I want to come in. In addressing the challenges of African parenting in the 21st century, I would like to address the challenges a father faces. The African father in the ancient times and the African father of now are two different people. The African father of the pre-colonial times was an empowered African father. He was in his African social economic setting, and he was empowered. He was not landless. He had land. Almost every African parent had land. He was not a beggar in the cities. He had a land and he had a garden. If his child matured, if his child matured, he would give him a piece of land. Go and build there. Have such and such acres. Cultivate food. And in our culture, when a child reached 18 years, the child would be shown where to build. The child would go to the nearby forest, be a compound, and he would cut trees, poles to come and erect his hut. Then he would plant the first acres of cassava. When the acres of cassava are matured, then he would come to tell the father, I now have food for my family. Now help me to get a wife. That is how the child would become a father. That is not the father of today. The father of today has been removed from the African setting. He has been removed from the African setting of a stable father in the village who can support his child to become a father. What is now happening is that we have a pandemic of unmentionable proportion. In the last census, it was discovered that 70% of children of father-bearing age are not leaving homes these days. And I am not be surprised if in this next census, we are in 80 or 90% of young adults who are ready to be men not leaving homes to start families. And this, Right Honorable, is a very big challenge. By the way, in a pure African setting, in the villages of Africa, there could never be a thief. How? Everybody had his garden. Everybody grew his crops. Who could go and cut the matoke of another one? The societal consensus, if you cut that matoke, your wife would leave you, your children would come upon you, the entire village would descend on you. Theft was impossible in the African setting. Because, as you said, parenting was a village matter.
Yeah.
A child was raised by the entire village. In Africa, they say a child is raised by the entire village. But the children we are raising now only knows you. From school, you put him in the house, doesn't know an uncle, doesn't know grandfather, and no wonder they don't fear us. You know, a child does not fear you, the father. No? The child fears the uncles. That if they gang on me, what will I do? The child fears the aunties. The child fears the entire village. An African child doesn't fear the father because he may even grow up size enough to beat you up. And then he reflects and says, no, I'll be taken to the village council. All the boys in the village will cane me. Have you not seen in the villages? A boy who has stolen is not caned by the father. Caned by the whole village, not so? Have you not seen? You don't have villages? Are you city men? Those were some of the values. So this British man went on to say, unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is the spiritual and cultural heritage, therefore I propose that we replace the old and ancient education system, her culture, if the African think that all that is English is good, they'll lose their self-esteem, a native culture, and they'll become what we want them to become, a dominated nation. Right Honorable Speaker, sir, therefore, if we are to do parenting as African parents, we must get back to our culture.
Thank you very much, Professor Len.
Yes. And I want to make this final point. And our culture, Right Honorable Speaker, is the education. The storytellings, I am 58 years. But Right Honorable Speaker, I will not forget the stories my mother told me at the fireplace when I was waiting for food. She gave me proverbs. She gave me African settings. The stories about the hair. But these were learning things. Up now, when I'm 58 years, I get into a situation, then I remember, oh, this is the story of Ichuli which was told. This is the story, the African story. So many values were being passed. And now, instead of those African values, we have AI, artificial intelligence, Google. And the Google will be told that it is okay to marry a man. The child will Google that is okay. So we go back.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Mr. Speaker, sir. Right off from the time when you started this think tank, many people in Africa have not been seeing where colonialism is taking us. Some people, they are still stuck with the ancient information. People think that these guys who colonized us, they left and there is no additional agenda. The same people who planned for self-trade, they are the same people who colonized us. They are the same people who are imposing on us their culture. They are the same people who are imposing on us homosexuality. They are the same people who are funding you to hate each other. They are the same people who are financing rebellions and wars, unnecessary wars, and just wars in Africa. Africa, Mr. Chairman, is a big project, the West. Very big. Now, when you have to discuss how to raise an African child and what went wrong, this is a very, very big and weighty topic. Because you have to go back right off from self-trade. What happened? Very big. And you have to give analysis. Before colonialism, during colonialism, and post-colonialism. What happened? How are we Africans raising our children? And what went wrong? If you can ask all those 4 questions, then you have answered this topic. Raising an African child depended on the following factors.
Number one,
identity. And on identity, it included your name. They could give you the name with a meaning. 2, the language. The language you speak. Very rich. There are certain things in our languages you cannot find in English. These are the things that used to be actually to identify us. Our clans. Because certain clans, there are certain things you should not do in your clan. What you should not eat. And that one used to help us in checking our manners and behaviors. Our culture. You mentioned a child was raised by a community, not a single family. That's why we used to produce the best and highly respected children in the world in terms of morals. Now, what went wrong? What
Money.
went wrong?
Money came in.
No.
Business.
No. There are many issues. The imperialists, they designed certain things that are going to monitor you and influence the world. So you look at now, what are the things that are influencing the world that are likely to influence the African child? What are those things? The media. You people who are on social media, what are you writing on a daily basis? What are you sending on daily basis? Look what the things you send on TikTok, on WhatsApp. Some people here waste a lot of data sending nude women. Some people even are sending pictures of the wars in some people even give me updates about Ukraine. You offload pictures and pictures of those planes, war planes. That's what is actually occupying your mind. Look at the movies you watch. Look what the soccer you watch. All these things, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, they are the ones that now have repressed
The African culture.
our African culture. And that's why it's very now hard to raise an African child when he is in the middle of those places. That's number one, the media. Now, the second thing, parents. Before parents, human rights. Human rights. There are many international protocols and conventions and treaties you have signed, you Africans, on children. Africans, we had a way how we discipline and correct our children. These days, you get a small stick to discipline your child. Tomorrow you are taken to police. You are arrested. Why? Human rights. Many schools now, if a child goes to class and starts sleeping, and the teacher does something on him, the parent, where did you get the right to beat my child? The child who was sleeping. You took the child to go to study, but he's sleeping in the class. You don't have the power to discipline a child. And yet before, a child was a communal child. You guys, you don't see this happening? And you call yourselves an errate? That you are the errate, educated class. Hey? Even here I can see all of you. You don't see these things on a daily basis? What have you done? You the media, who are good at capturing our voices, what have you done to influence this? You teachers, why can't you raise these issues in a better forum? Do you know, Mr. Speaker, sir?
As you finish.
There is what they call daycare.
Yeah.
Daycare and night care school.
That's a boarding now.
Many parents now in Africa are no longer, by the way, caring for their children. There are some people and institutions that are caring for their children on their behalf. You find a school written on daycare something school. Meaning that a child as early as 6 months, someone is taking care of him or her. So when will you get the time to raise this child? Now, in a conclusion, the NRM government has provided some, at least has tried. Every police station, there is community and family liaison officers. Every police station. The President of the Republic of Uganda, through his initiative, in his manifesto, launched what they call socio-economic transformation, where many projects that are really catering for the youth are there. For instance, the PDM you hear, that money is there. Actually, 30% of that money they send on the parish is meant for the youth. Are you aware of that? There is money from Yuga, where youth is also catered for. These people don't, I don't know whether they know or don't know, or deliberately don't. So stop going for free money, use government programs, and I'm also appealing to all parents. Please, get at least 1 hour and take care of your children. All of us, if you don't do that, I'm telling you. By the way, Mr. Speaker, now hear this. An African parent who is not caring about his child is directly and indirectly selling his continent. Good evening.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Allow me, Mr. Speaker, define a few terms. There is something called eugenics. Eugenics. By definition, this is what I see. It is the practice or advocacy of improving human species by one selective mating of people with specific desirable hereditary traits. And two, allow me look at some of the organizations that have been in the practice of eugenics. There is something called the American Eugenic Society. The war against family is not just begun. There is a popular company within this country, Uganda, that deals and advises or advocates for something called abortion. And this is the team. Why I read the American Society, the American Eugenic Society. It is the team that is funding this. One of the things that I look at majorly under the circumstances is how much do we need for the family setup world over. If by 1973 we already waging the war, before we look at Africa in context, do we desire the family elsewhere, anywhere? Now, the very first things we look at when you're constituting a family, you have to look at the father and then the reproduction. We dedicated an entire setup, an entire agency, an entire organization that is intently looking at breaking the family. There is an agency here that deals majorly with that. When you go there, the first thing they advise you, one, they even give you the medical attention to abort. That is the type of people that are funding. The question is the challenges of African parenting. African parents are not in a bubble. They're on the global stage. Which global stage is intent about the fight? It is not just, it is not within the pigeonhole of Africa, but world over the fight is on. In the US, we have a team of people called social workers, that it is deliberate for them. What they look at is deliberate for them to assess whether a parent is fit the mom, the couple that has the baby is fit to take care of what they're bringing. And they have the legal right to deny the parents the right to raise these kids. What do? They push them into foster homes. The American system is corporate enough, has called it a family system, where a child is not raised by their parents, is raised by a team of, should I say team, but by a group of individuals who legally deem themselves fit to take care of this. So the fight has not just begun. It has been on for ages. And then, allow me, Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me thank His Excellency, the government of the Republic, for the efforts they have put in. Of course, he has good intentions. For long, he has had good intentions for the family. Indeed, by the moves that have been in the Parliament, he has maintained a steady posture to maintain the African parasetting of what a family should be. Professor Lengo put it very well, that there are guidelines that should be followed, and he has indeed provided them. There are questions that now come. I think as Africans, maybe, let me not speak as Africans, as Ugandans, we need to create a distinction between one, civilization, modernization, and westernization. Whether we are or we are not, by belief or by whatever someone's choice may be, we are in Africa, we are in Uganda. The problems that Ugandans have cannot be solved by westernization, cannot be solved by modernization.
African problems, African solutions.
African problems must be resolved by African solutions. Now, question is, I come back to the state. To what extent has the state, as the Sabalwine, provided a distinction and a protection to Africanicity, if I may use the word, to African solutions against the westernization? Because whatever we see, when I look at the education sector, until today, we've changed the curriculum. But until very recent, we are very glad to go through the system that makes us clerks look for the jobs. Yet, as Professor Lenyo mentioned, as Africans, as long as you attain an age, by initiation, I think all African settings had that. By initiation, when you passed, you had a right. There were provisions for you to become a father. What does the state give us? Mioga, very beautiful, very corrupt. So it is what is on the ground. PDM, very beautiful. Implementation. Now, too, is it really applicable when you give us money under the current circumstances that we are in? Are we going to use it for what is intended to? What are the African solutions? What are the Ghanaian solutions? Professor put it right. Professor put it right. When you're at junctions, you look to the ways of the ancient. When the Samurai looks at the setting as we have, the best is we give them peanuts. We give them money. How much money is it enough to make me adopt a home, get into a home? Because even if it is 10 million by inflation, cost of living here, by the time I leave this place to the get, 10 million is done. Really, are you going to keep on recapitalizing the 10 million? And am I going to get into the institution? Then, there is a deliberate push to break the family. Not only in Uganda. I was reading something, if you may allow me. I was reading a publication by one of the gentlemen, very celebrated, Albert Pike. He said, if you want to change humanity, the first thing you do, distance the humanity from culture. It is a success. Albert Pike existed in the late of 1930s.
What did he say?
If you want, let me speak to context. If you want to change society, to bring a new society into, to create a new culture, a new society, distance them from culture. And it's a success. Africa all over is something we are speaking to. We want to be modernized, we want to be westernized at the cost of the culture. When you lose a culture, you've lost the land. Recently, this is, allow me to say to the last, recently, the King of England during the COVID times said, we can all be happy as long as we own nothing. He's a king. He made this statement at a very peculiar place, at the opening of the games, Olympic Games in Birmingham. We are all going to be happy as long as we own nothing. Now, if we have a leadership that actually thinks that for us to be happy, you have to own nothing, the state has to own everything, and you rent from the state, how shall we become independent? How can I create a family when I own literally nothing apart from the clothes I'm having? I cannot own land. We've deliberately made it impossible in some states, particularly in Africa, to own land by an individual. Even here, it's not yet here. But by the look of things, the cost of land per day, it is increasing. Not even increasing, it is doubling and multiplying. Now, if today, getting a plot of land around Kampala, it may cost me anywhere between 50 million to 200. How is it going to be in a period of 10 years? Shall we be able to own land? Why should I punish someone's daughter, bring them to a single room that I cannot afford? Now we are paying house tax. Why should I punish them? Why don't I stay home and leave these things as they are? Because I can't afford them. And lastly, the press.
And you're a journalist.
And I'm a journalist. There is a mistake we make. Today, allow me to be hostile to the field. In the press, we actually do not tell you what you ought to hear. We don't tell you what you must hear or what you must know. Today's press, he bears me witness. Today's press, it is who has the money that will communicate.
Apart from me.
Apart from him.
Because for me, I speak it as it is.
You speak what others fear to. Good. But let's look at the major houses. Let's look at BBC.
Al Jazeera.
CNN. As long as someone has painted a better picture, monetary picture. Let me use an example of the COVID. Even when all houses knew that these shots were not tested for human consumption, we pushed them. Of recent, AstraZeneca came out and apologized after damage had been done. But look at
after killing people.
A lot of them.
Yes.
But look at all the major houses that even here in Uganda we quote. Every major house world over has a representative from the medical, from the pharmaceutical industry. Now, they are funding us. They're paying my check. You're not. He has told me, this and this is good, right? He's going to pay my salary. Why should I care? Because he pays. It is common knowledge. He holds the pen, controls the ink. He's not here to speak behind the camera, but he's actually holding the pen in my hands because at the end of the month, he has to pay. So the price is, I don't want to say solely, but is majorly responsible for the breaking of the family institutions as we have. Because by either deliberation or by proximity or whatever it is, the family sectors within, we are not funding the outlook, the painted image of the African family. So why should we concentrate on it if we have Hazard, something like that, Chief Ranao? Why should we even care about a good family? Yesterday was a debate, the budget was read. I looked at a good number of houses that are still talking about shifra, even when it is only 9 trillion, 1 trillion that is going into agriculture. Agriculture which sustains the economy. If we lose the economy, we cannot have a family. And you're talking about that is a price for you. So,
Thank you so much.
The best thing we can do is if we can answer the African problems, attack them from the African front, and provide the African solutions. I beg to submit.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Speaker, first of all, I find it very laughable that today people have to sit down, think very critically, and choreograph to the extent of putting in writing parenting guidelines. On the other side, I think it is a good thing. But then it brings us to the question of the ancient parents. Where did they read parenting guidelines? Now, this is a clear indicator and very evident enough that by the time parents have to sit down to read parenting guidelines to parent children they give birth to, disaster is in our midst. I therefore want to arrive at a comparison basing on a very simple concept: family. The 1999 African Union Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children, Article 8, Section 1, attempts to break down the terminology of what a family is. And it says that a family is the smallest, natural, and most basic unit of society. We have African parenting on the left and Western world lifestyle on the right. What does African parenting say? The right things for children to do. What does the Western world lifestyle tell you? The rights of children. I want to tell you that, like always, we quote writers from the West. Today I want to quote an African writer, because as a younger generation, part of revamping our education is to begin philosophically quoting writers from within. Each time somebody writes, Albert Einstein said, somebody said, now, an African writer in the name of Andrew Irumba Katusabe wrote and said, there is no room for democracy in my home. There is only room to do the right thing. I want to interest you fellow Africans to the fact that before we teach children their rights, children must learn to do the right thing.
Today I've quoted me.
An African
I
writer.
don't even remember when I wrote that.
Secondly, the concept of capitalism versus socialism. It is a wide concept that goes till the family structure and family setting, capitalism versus socialism. Socialism is very much attributed to African parenting, living communally and not having too much while the rest have nothing. What is the Western world lifestyle? Capitalism. Insane accumulation of wealth. Exploitation. You must have everything while everybody has nothing. Now today, those that are supposed to parent even steal the little from those that they call the vulnerable poor, and grab land that belongs to the orphaned and the widowed, while those they are parenting actually look on and emulate those examples. Thirdly, there is a lot of pressure to conform to Western standards of parenting. We are at a time where now a parent has to choose between proper parenting and whether letting children to go with modern expectations. The stigma associated with this is very unbearable. And what kind of generation do we have now? The children that we have today. Conclusively, I want to leave the audience, both the physical and online audience, with two questions. One, what footsteps are you leaving in children's lives? The modern day Pan-Africanism must lure us from the angle, the Western world, the Europeans, even things that you can do in your own family. In your own family. Your children are walking half naked. The Western world, the president, the parliament, let us start with what is basic. And then we go to what is expansive. Secondly, before any parent begins to worry about what kind of world they are leaving their children in, it is also very important that they start to worry about what kind of children they are living in the world. If we can only address those fundamental concepts, we now begin to meaningfully parent children. Lastly, I want to avail a few solutions in that regard, because now talking about a problem without availing solutions is not very conclusive. First, we must revitalize our traditional family structures. The moment you correct the base, then you align the middle and even the top. Children like we that have grown up in an African setting, there are certain things I certainly cannot do. The songs you are complaining about, children that have been raised a certain way, how do I start? How would I start? Shufra? Hozabe? If you have grown up a certain way, you do not do certain things. Secondly, we need to develop a culturally sensitive parenting based on culture. If you are a parent that comes from families where children go as far as bleaching to look like the whites, and you think the problem is not in your home, it is actually outside there, you should revisit your thinking. And lastly, is to encourage an intergenerational dialogue and knowledge transfer. To listen from Professor Alenyo to tell us that back then, this is what parenting used to be. This is how we used to handle many of these problems. And I believe it was a more proper generation than this one.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate, with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
I actually have had lots of challenges being spoken about in front there, and lots of solutions. I want to give a few details to give a background check. In 1969, there was a California's Family Law Act of no fault divorce laws, and after the law was passed, there was 30% increase in divorce rate. We also look at gender roles and feminism. This was in 1993. That's when the statistics, actually the Office for National Statistics, said that between 1971 and 1991, 25% of families were broken. I believe when it comes to sensitivity of how to raise children, indoctrination starts at home. Right now we have very many absent fathers. We have very many single mothers in society. And I believe a child who's raised by a present mother and a present father is different from a child who's raised by a single parent, regardless of whether it's a male parent or a female parent. So, I believe this has brought about a lot of irresponsibility. Some time back, I watched a video on TikTok. I believe this boy was about 17, a boy in high school. I think that was in South Africa. This boy made a statement and said that my child has no right to have a present father because my father wasn't available. You understand? So you imagine a young boy who is raised with no father, he feels like he has the right to do the same. And this is something that's going to continue. If he has a son, the son will also feel the same way. My child has no right to have a present father in the home. We also would look at feminism. You know, we have lots of women in workspaces. As much as it has been advantageous for us to have working mothers, because in times whereby we've had fathers who have lost their lives, or fathers who have decided to walk away from their families, these women have been in the workspace trying to provide for their children. But then, we also can't avoid that you find mothers, 9 p.m. in the night, they're outside. You know, these ladies who sell things on the roadside. What time do they have to talk to their children about life, to talk to their children what they should expect in society? So we find that lots of women out there are exhausted in the workspace, failing to give their children what they ought to learn, which is way different from what was there earlier on in the African setting. I will leave us with a verse in Proverbs 22 verse 6 that says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from that way. Just like I said, indoctrination starts when the children are young. I believe right now we wouldn't be having young men who are sleeping around for validation from young women, sexual validation. We wouldn't be having young girls who are sleeping around for monetary value. And then these young girls end up getting pregnant. They have children. These boys walk away, and these are the very boys who come out to say, I can't marry a single mother. So I believe this is going to be a responsibility that starts with us before we can even look at, you know, the background of the African setting. Thank you very much.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Now, the fastest growing industry in Africa, the fastest growing industry in most of our countries in Africa is religion.
Hey,
Almost everywhere you go,
you have called it an industry.
yeah, it's an industry.
So, what are they manufacturing
Because
or producing?
one of the reasons why I say it's an industry, religion is no longer for the common good of a person. It is for economic purposes. Now, still on religion. Families, most families that we have in our African setting today, when you're young, they tame you and teach you things. There is a Garden of Eden. They tell you about all the saints in the Bible. You will never hear them telling you about your forefathers. This was your grandfather. Your grandfather used to do this and this. And we are here praising day and night in church when you do not know even who your grandfather was. So, Mr. Speaker, on a sad note, if you look at women today, women, yeah, in families, you would even wonder whether they are women. How can a woman, stand in front of a man when he's speaking? A father, the supreme head of a family, is speaking, and the woman is just replying anyhow. When I was a child, I used to observe my father, the way he used to do his things, and my grandfather, at several occasions. Never at any moment did I hear a woman saying anything. You would first listen and then reply later. So, this whole nonsense that we are hearing everywhere of woman emancipation, you are a woman. You will never be a man. You will never be a man. So accept that there is a certain responsibility that has been entrusted to you by the Creator. It has been there right away from birth. It is not that we have just got it now. It has just been there. Don't bring in the religious part. I don't know, God said to do this. It has been there. So in our normal African setting, let the women do what they are supposed to do, and let the men remain the superior heads of the family. Don't tell your kid that when your father behaves like this, then you sideline with the what? With the man. Just because your father is rude.
Thank you,
Father remains the father.
Thank you so much.
Speaker, the other point that I would like to make is that we are having miseducation When we were young, they used to tell you that you going to a neighbor's home is okay. But today, when you go to most civilized areas, if a child goes from here to the next neighborhood, they would fear that that child would die, would be poisoned. We used to eat all over the village. You move from one household to another household. But today, if you dare to move from one household to another, your mother will be scared that this child will be poisoned. So we need to break all these nonsense that we are just adopting today and go back to the original culture setting. Mr. Speaker, let me end with this famous saying in Kiswahili that machamiwa ni mtumwa, meaning he who abandons his culture is a slave. Thank you so much.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Sheikh Mohammed Rashid Al Maktoum. He said these words. He said, his grandfather rode a camel. His father rode a camel. He himself drives a G65. His son drives a Range Rover. His grandchild drives a Land Cruiser. But his great-grandchild might ride a camel again. Those were the words of this founder of the Bible. He said that hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Then weak men create hard times. When I look at his words,
Too philosophical.
yeah, he was so philosophical. When I look at his words and when I try to see what he meant, I think he was seeing the growth patterns of the families in his nation. So when he was looking at the growth, the changing family patterns in his nation, he realized that the changing patterns in his country, that is the direction where they were heading to. Because of the impact of the Western culture, I see that there has been a generational gap today. A generational gap in which way? One, we have in terms of discipline versus permissiveness. So today, in the earlier times, in the early history, we had discipline. There was communal discipline of the children. But today there is what we call permissiveness. Children are allowed to do what they think is right. That is what we call permissiveness. But in the earlier times, it was the communal engagement of disciplining the children. Now, another thing is cultural assimilation. When you look at the lifestyles of today, there is cultural assimilation in the way that people, all of the children, are trying to live the Western lifestyle in terms of dress code, in terms of speaking the language they speak. When someone is dressing, that me I'm dressing, this is the American style of dressing, but it's someone from Uganda. So that assimilation of the Western cultural assimilation into the Africans has changed the lifestyle and the parenting of the Africans.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
So, what is the problem? What is the problem that we are trying to discuss today?
I don't know.
The problem we are trying to discuss today is losing the upcoming generation to the Western culture. And is this the only problem? No, it's not the only problem. And even if just that we are discussing this problem is an indicator that there are other problems that we are facing and a lot of people that are yet to come. The existence of this problem acts as an indicator of different challenges that the African continent and Uganda at large is facing. So what is the basic problem? The basic problem, and
The first problem, and particularly Uganda is facing, is the problem of governance. The problem of governance.
Governance.
Yes. When you look at, I'm going to give examples. When you look at Libya, when Muammar Gaddafi came into leadership in 1969, he was very clear about how the country was to be governed. He said everything, and he led the country according to the rules, whatever directives he put in place. When Idi Amin came into power in 1972, he was very clear, and amongst the decrees he gave was the decree of stripping girls that are putting on short skirts naked. That was very, very clear. When you look at the examples outside, when you look at North Korea, they are very clear of how their societies are led. When you look at China, they have how their societies are supposed to be led. And all those things all come from leadership and governance. Therefore,
Therefore, in conclusion, you're saying the problem is governance.
Yes, the problem is governance.
Thank you.
Leadership and governance. That if the top leadership, which is the regulator of each and everything, let it be all the institutions, let it be churches, the institutions of learning, let it be UC, the regulator of media. If they don't do their role, then all these problems still exist.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Utkanga. Thank you so much, Natasha.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.
Thank you so much. We've come to the end of tonight's show. My name is Andrew Irumba Katusabe. Let's go and start practicing our African and traditions and cultures. Let's live according to how our ancestors lived. Thank you so much.
Free your mind now. Be part of People's Pan-African Parliament, the Pan-African Pyramid Debate with your speaker, Andrew Irumba Katusabe.